What happened in this hearing is a vivid example of why accountability, professionalism, and ethical leadership matter so profoundly in the United States military. Senator Jack Reed pressed Secretary Hegseth on issues ranging from DEI policies to pardons of convicted war criminals, exposing deeper questions about leadership, readiness, and the culture of our armed forces.
Thank you. You're a very understanding chairman. I like that. I like that. Ms. Hegseth, you've written, and it's quote, "Oh yeah, and fire any general who hasn't carried water for Obama and Biden's extra constitution and agenda-driven transformation for our military. Clean house and start over." It's come to my attention that current serving military personnel have received emails threatening them with being fired for supporting the current DOD policies. One mail that was sent to a military officer with the subject line, "Clean house," reminiscent of your specific comment, states, and I quote, "With the incoming administration looking to remove disloyal, corrupt, traitorous, liberal officers such as yourself, we will certainly be putting your name into the list of those personnel to be removed. We know you support the woke DEI policies and will ensure you never again influence anyone in the future. You and the redacted spouse's name will be lucky if you're able to collect your military requirement," end quote. Now, I want to remind everyone that these policies that are being referred to date back decades, to the 1940s and 50s, with respect to racial discrimination particularly, and administrations of both parties, including the Trump administration and their first party, caused those policies to be enforced. Mr. Hegseth, are you aware of these emails being sent to officers?
Senator, you mentioned the word accountability, which is something we have not had for the last 4 years.
Are you aware of these messages being sent to officers?
Certainly I'm not aware of that. It's not one of my efforts, but there's been no accountability for the disaster of the withdrawal in Afghanistan. And that's precisely why we're here today.
Excuse me.
Is that leadership has been unwilling to take accountability. It's time to restore that to our most senior ranks.
You've written publicly that DI policy is a distraction and have military personnel walking on eggshells. Do you believe that emails like that are essentially threatening both a serving officer and a spouse and claiming that they'll lose their pension will have a distraction and detract from the lethality?
Senator, you mentioned the 40s and 50s, and you're precisely right. The military was a forerunner in courageous racial integration in ways no other institutions were willing to do. I served with men and women of all backgrounds because of the courage of people decades and decades ago. Incredibly important. However, the DEI policies of today are not the same as what happened back then. They're dividing troops inside formations, causing commanders to walk on eggshells, not putting meritocracy first. That's the indictment that's made by those serving right now.
Excuse me.
And why we're having this conversation.
All of your public comments don't talk about meritocracy. They talk about liberal democratic efforts that are destroying the military, that those people are our enemies. That's not meritocracy. That's a political view. And your goal, as I see emerging, is to politicize the military in favor of your particular positions, which you've outlined extensively, which would be the worst blow to the professionalism of the United States military and would undercut readiness, undercut retention, because I can see officers receiving these emails beginning to wonder very seriously if they should continue. Let me change the subject for a moment here. You've been instrumental in securing pardons for several convicted war criminals. In at least 2 of these cases, the military personnel who served in combat with these convicted service members were not supportive of the pardons. They did their duty as soldiers to report war crimes. Your definition of lethality seems to embrace those people who do commit war crimes, rather than those who stand up and say, this is not right. So what's the response to your service members who personally witnessed these and courageously reported them to their superiors?
Senator, as someone who's led men in combat directly and had to make very difficult decisions, I've thought very deeply about the balance between legality and lethality, ensuring that the men and women on the front lines have the opportunity to destroy with and close the enemy, and that lawyers aren't the ones getting in the way. I'm not talking about disavowing the laws of war, or the Geneva Conventions, or the Uniform Code of Military Justice. Sir, I'm talking about restrictive rules of engagement that these men and women behind me understand they've lived with on the battlefield, which has made it more difficult to defeat our enemies. In many of the cases you're talking about in particular, sir, there was evidence withheld, there was prosecutorial misconduct, and as someone who looks case by case and defaults to the warfighter, to the men and women with dust on their boots, not the second guessers in air-conditioned offices in Washington, D.C.
Excuse me.
I look case by case and was proud to work with President Trump to understand those cases and ensure that our warriors are always looked out for.
Those cases were adjudicated by who? People in Washington or fellow non-commissioned officers who had also served, sacrificed, and believed in the ethic of the military? Who were the court martial?
Senator, in multiple cases, they were actually acquitted. But
some
charges
cases,
lingered,
yes,
regardless of where those
some were
competing authorities were. Yes, sir.
Some were, but others were convicted, and you asked for pardon. That's the only reason you asked for pardon, because they were convicted. But the other factor, too, is you've already disparaged in writing the Geneva Convention, the rules of law, all of these things. How will you be able to effectively lead a military in which one of the principal elements is discipline, respect for lawful authority? You have made statements to your platoon after being briefed by a JAG officer. Well, by the way, would you explain what a JAG off is?
I don't think I need to, sir,
Why not?
because the men and women watching understand.
Well, perhaps some of my colleagues don't understand.
It would be a JAG officer who puts his or her own priorities in front of the warfighters. Their promotions, their medals, in front of having the backs of those who are making the tough calls on the front lines.
Thank you, Senator Reid.
Interesting.
Thank you, Senator
Thank
Reid.
you very much.
Let's start with the DEI discussion. Hegseth has publicly criticized diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts as politically motivated, framing them as part of a liberal agenda rather than an essential component of building a strong, professional military. Reid pointed out that these policies, in fact, have roots going back decades, even to the 1940s and 50s, when the military led the nation in integrating racially and breaking down barriers that other institutions were unwilling to confront. DEI isn't about politics. It's about ensuring meritocracy, fairness, and cohesion. Reid also highlighted a disturbing trend, serving officers receiving threatening emails warning that supporting current DoD policies could jeopardize their careers or pensions. That kind of intimidation is unacceptable. It distracts from mission readiness, undermines trust, and threatens morale. Military effectiveness depends on leaders and service members being able to follow the law and uphold ethical standards without fear of retribution. It's not just policy, it's the foundation of operational cohesion and trust among troops. The conversation then shifted to pardons for convicted war criminals. Hegseth defended these pardons as protecting the warfighter and prioritizing combat effectiveness over legal oversight. Reid challenged him, pointing out that men and women in uniform had courageously reported these crimes, and yet the pardons effectively rewarded violations of law and ethics. This is not a theoretical debate. It touches the very principles of military discipline, adherence to the Geneva Conventions, and the ethical framework that allows the U.S. to maintain legitimacy on the world stage. Leadership that undermines these rules risks eroding not only discipline, but also international trust in American forces. Another key point Reid raised is the concept of meritocracy versus politicization. Hegseth's critiques of DEI, combined with his public statements about officers loyal to prior administrations, signal a dangerous risk, turning the military into a political tool rather than a professional institution guided by merit, competence, and adherence to the law. Reid emphasized that politicizing personnel decisions can degrade morale, retention, and readiness. It creates an environment where capable leaders and service members are sidelined not for performance, but for perceived ideological alignment. This exchange teaches several critical lessons. First, leadership is about balance, protecting the rights and safety of service members while ensuring readiness, ethical behavior, and compliance with the law. Second, operational success is inseparable from accountability and adherence to legal and ethical standards. A military that ignores rules of engagement, international law, or professional ethics is not stronger. It is weaker and more vulnerable. Third, threats, intimidation, and politicization within the ranks are real obstacles to mission effectiveness and cohesion. These are not abstract debates. They have tangible consequences for American troops and national security. For viewers, the broader takeaway is clear. Supporting a military that is ethical, merit-based, and accountable is not a partisan issue. It is a national security imperative. Leadership matters. The decisions made at the top, whether regarding pardons, personnel policies, or DEI implementation, ripple down to the men and women risking their lives in service of the nation. Accountability ensures that leaders serve both the mission and people, not politics. This hearing reminds us that effective oversight, courageous questioning, and defense of professional standards are essential for a military that is respected at home and abroad. Citizens can engage by staying informed, asking elected officials about military accountability, and supporting policies that ensure our armed forces are disciplined, ethical, and prepared. Leadership is more than rhetoric. It's measured by the lives protected, the missions accomplished, and the ethical standards upheld. In short, Reed's questioning underscores that protecting the military's integrity is as important as advancing its capabilities. Merit, ethics, and accountability are not optional. They are the pillars that allow American service members to succeed honorably and safely on the front lines of global security.